Hi, good morning. It's Mark Owen from Moose Mark PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks. This morning we have a distinguished panel of people, hopefully giving us news, views and advice. Today we have Sam Holliday from the Federation of Small Business. Hi, Sam.
Morning, Mark.
And Ryan Hancock, partner at Hazelwoods. Hi, Ryan. I did tell him to turn off his sound. And then we got Sue Smith as well, Director of GB Solutions. Good morning, Sue.
Hi there.
And finally, we've got Anthony Stick, franchisee owner of Beauvoir in Gloucester. Did I say that right, Ant? Again, he's got... There we go. Anyway, good, very, very good morning, and thanks for joining us on this very first show. Sam, let's be honest, all the newspapers are full of it. The lockdown going up north, it's looking pretty dire again with COVID. What's the sort of stories that we picked out for us today in the national press?
Well, I think working for the FSB, I talk to a lot of small businesses, as you do, Mark, and there is a general sense of confusion out there at the moment. I think, you know, a few months ago, whenever I was doing social media posts and things about what was going on, I was always able to put at the end, we're all in this together. And I genuinely believed that. I thought we were all going through the same thing at the same time. We all understood the same rules. It really doesn't feel like that anymore now. It feels like the country's completely divided, both physically and in terms of the way we think this is going. And I think that's reflected in every conversation I seem to have. I mean, bear in mind, we're on the border of Wales, which at the end of today is virtually going into complete lockdown. And for businesses in, say, the Forest of Dean and stuff, that's going to be a real issue. So that confusion is picked up by the fact that in the Mail today, you can see the headline there, just 1 in 8 understand the rules. They did a poll of people. What can you do in tier 1? What can you do in tier 2? What can you do in tier 3? And only 1 in 8, 13% of people knew exactly what the case was. And I think that's why, in some ways, a national lockdown is an attractive option because it's simplified. But I've been arguing with colleagues around the country that how can you close down potentially all the businesses in Cornwall where there's only 30, 40 cases per 100,000, when you're up north, they're 500 or 600. You know, whether you like it or not, I hate it that politics has got involved now and all that kind of stuff. It's inevitable, I guess, but it doesn't feel like we're a united country at the moment. And the papers are full of that. And I'll tell you something else as well, Mark, and you'll understand this knowing about newspaper biases and things. At the start of it, you had a little bit of that, but most people are all on side. Now, your news is governed by what the paper thinks about the government or what the paper thinks about the way it's handled coronavirus. And that's a shame because that's why only 13% of people are getting the right answers, because we're now being polarized so much. And that's reflected across all the papers today. Nobody really knows where we are.
Do you think also the media has turned against the government? I mean, for one point, I started turning off the TV with the national news because it was so negative. It was, you know, there were reporters just trying to score goals rather than actually trying to get the story.
I think there is some of that. I mean, we've got to look at it. I mean, do you know what? When this started, I know people are passionate supporters of every political party, so I like to be as open-minded as I can be. I didn't see Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak as conservatives. I saw them as the Chancellor and the Prime Minister at the time. And had that been Keir Starmer, I would have had the same feeling exactly. You're right. I don't think we're at that stage now, which is why, and I know not everybody feels the same, but I love reading the papers. I'm a massive paper reader, but I still enjoy the BBC. It's still, for me, the authoritative voice. I know people on the left who think it's incredibly right-wing. I know people on the right who think it's incredibly left-wing. But I do think that it's important that we use sources like, dare I say it, Punchline, dare I say it, like the BBC, and organisations like ourselves, the FSB. We have our website and we just try and put the facts, not the opinions. We've all got opinions, but, you know, we need to know where we're going with this.
I think sometimes they report the opinions too much rather than just following the story and following the facts.
Absolutely.
What is the general view of the Federation of Small Business at the moment with the climate out there and what's actually happened here in Gloucestershire?
Well, I think we've been very encouraged by the fact that just when we think the government isn't going to provide any more support, more money appears. And yesterday was quite a shock, really, what Rishi Sunak produced for the North again. But there is a bit of a question mark long term about it, because I think one of the papers, it might have been the Times this morning, is saying that this is all adding up to about £400 billion of debt. Now, what that means is that the five of us are either going to have to pay an awful lot more tax in the next few years, or our children, our grandchildren are going to be saddled with a sort of debt that's not been seen since the Second World War. And yes, it's vital that we support businesses, and that's what we're all here to try and do. But we've got to realise that it's impossible to give 100% support for every business, because some of the businesses that might have been struggling before COVID, you know, it's really heightened that fact. So I think we've been encouraged by the fact the government has listened, and on a lot of occasions we thought the door was finally closed and it opened a bit ajar again, and so that is encouraging. But there is a reality in all this. We're all going to have to pay this back at some point. £400 billion.
It's a lot of money. I mean, that brings us nicely into Ryan, actually. Ryan is an accountant at Hazelwood's, partner at Hazelwood's. Ryan, I mean, he's right. How are we going to pay all this money back?
Well, that's a very good question, isn't it? That's assuming, of course, that everybody can ride the wave, as it were, and get through the other side of this. And everyone's got half an eye on the first half of next year, when some of these elements of debt need to start being paid back. So, you know, one thing we are telling businesses that we're dealing with is, you know, keep an eye on your cash flow. Obviously, it's been hand to mouth for quite a long time now. The government have been very good at supporting with the furlough scheme and the grants that are available, deferring VAT payments, those sorts of things. But, you know, as you say, everyone's got an eye on next year when it's going to start getting a bit painful, and they have to start paying it all back. You know, we've dealt with a lot of businesses that have done reasonably well through this period and unfortunately not had to use some of these schemes, but still, you know, we're not over yet. It's got a long way to go before we're through the other side of this. And the ones that have had to borrow quite heavily to ensure their survival will have to find a way to manage that debt as it moves forward.
Is there particular sectors that you're finding that are doing well? I mean, with obviously pharmaceutical, logistics, any of your clients seem to be doing, you don't have to name the clients, but sectors?
Well, there's a very mixed bag, to be perfectly honest. So we've got, you know, a lot of people have found a new route to market. That's been key for a lot of businesses, where they've either gone virtual like we're doing today, or whether it's moving into areas which have had a high demand, like providing PPE in whatever form or other. Can they continue doing that once the pandemic is over? That's going to be the big question. They obviously need to protect their customer base, and whether that involves doing more like they're doing at the moment or reverting back to type beforehand, we will only see. So I guess, you know, there's everything on the scale out there. There's those which are actually doing really, really well and bucking the trend, and those which have closed the doors and doing absolutely nothing. We all know that the hospitality industry is struggled quite a lot. With lockdowns appearing around the country, it's not going to get any better for them. The government are trying to help with that, as you've already suggested, but you know, will that be enough? And of course, now that the furlough scheme has switched its tack, I know that the government have changed the rules a little bit around that only yesterday. But will employers be able to subsidise and pay their salaries of the staff that are not productive? Again, it will depend on the sort of industry that they're in, I'm sure.
No, I mean, it's funny you talk about sectors that are doing really well. That brings us very nicely, actually, to Anthony from Belvoir. Good morning, Anthony. Yeah, you got to switch your little button on, buddy. You've got to put your sound back
there we go. Have I done that correctly?
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Anthony. One of the sectors that has done really well over the last 6 months, or when we came out of for being unlocked, is that pent-up demand for housing. What's it looking like now? Yeah,
it's still the same. There's as soon as the lockdown finished, there was a massive demand and a massive spike, and that's still continuing on. It's beginning to tail off now as the window closes on the opportunity of taking advantage of the stamp duty holiday takes effect at the end of March. Whether or not that gets extended, obviously nobody knows at this stage, but anybody looking to take advantage of that needs to get their property on the market and sold, you know, obviously before then, actually sold and completed before then, and that's the key phrase there, completed, I guess. Yeah, there's a couple of different aspects that have driven the demand, and that's been the Brexit side of things, which obviously stymied the growth and the economic certainty of the economy. And that largely got, we thought that was going to be unblocked in sort of January, February time, but then obviously the COVID side of things happened. And so when the lockdown finished in, was at the end of July, then there was a huge, massive demand, not only from the unblocking of the Brexit side of things, but the unblocking of the COVID side of things, and driven by people wanting to expand their living accommodation, gardens, unfortunately split ups. So yeah, it's been the busiest market it's been for a very long time.
Does it help actually being a franchise? Does that, do you think that gives you an extra edge in the marketplace as well, being part of a bigger overall group?
Yeah, I certainly do. We've got the backing of, there's 300 branches in the Belvoir network as far as the group is concerned, and then that means that we get an awful lot more support than perhaps an independent might, from a legal perspective, from a marketing perspective. We're not known hugely in Gloucester as far as a sales agent is concerned, more on the letting side of things. But yeah, there's an awful lot more support, and that can only be a good thing.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Ant. Going back over to Sam for a second. Sam, just let's go through those newspapers. Have you picked out any of those stories?
Yeah, there's plenty of lot going on. You're just talking about sectors, actually. I've got the papers, but I just went onto the BBC's website and was quite surprised to read this, that British retail sales have continued to increase for the 5th consecutive month. They went up by 1.5% between August and September. And you may think, oh, well, that was from a very low base, but they're now 5.5% higher than they were in February. So that's really encouraging. And I sensed that myself as I was walking around Gloucester in August and September. The streets look really busy again. I mean, you work in the city centre, Mark. You're there every day. It did feel like things are moving, but that is encouraging. And what we want that to be, though, is a good balance between physical shops and online ones. We know that online is doing very well, but we need to support our physical shops as well. And those figures imply that we are. So I think that's very encouraging. And talk about trends and things and the times. I mean, Anthony was talking about how sectors are moving. There has been movement in a lot of other sectors. And I picked up a story today about people's changing habits. It strikes me, talking to people, that during lockdown, people either drank a lot more or a lot less. Some people said they've drank far too much. A lot of people said they've had a chance to reevaluate their stock. And I'm currently, because I probably did the former, I'll be honest, I'm doing that Stop October thing. So I do like a good range of alcohol-free beers, and my wife's had alcohol-free gin and tonic, would you believe? And today, it says in the Sun, the big news is that they're about to introduce an alcohol-free Guinness. So there you go, pure genius, apparently that is. So those of you that think, well, I can't possibly go alcohol-free because I can't get my Guinness, it's heading your way.
Fantastic. I've never been a big Guinness fan myself. I'm more of a wine man. I managed to put on quite a lot of weight during the lockdown and slowly losing it again. Talking about different sectors are doing well, and the retail sector, it's good that there seems to be a bump. Let's go over to Sue, actually, who's recruitment director of GB Solutions, one of the best known recruitment agencies here in Gloucestershire. Sue, thank you for joining us this morning. I would imagine there are sectors that are really, really struggling at this particular moment. What have you noticed in the marketplace?
Well, it's exactly that. I think in March, we were very aware of a skills shortage, and the people that are in demand are accountants, solicitors, people in e-commerce, and there aren't any more of those than there were in March. So in fact, in certain sectors, there's a stronger demand than there ever has been, and there isn't a talent pool to fill it. I can't conjure up, nobody's going to pass their accountancy exams in the 6 months that's going to make them a fully fledged accountant that we can place. So I think it's very patchy. We don't operate in the hospitality sector, but clearly education, healthcare are doing well, accounting, any professional services, IT needless to say, is through the roof. And actually, I'm working a lot on 2 big e-commerce businesses in Gloucester, and they're absolutely booming. I mean, DIY, doing at the home has become the new hobby kind of thing, because there isn't too much else to do. So there are businesses that have bought new warehouses, expanded. We're hiring in warehouse managers for them. But unfortunately, it's at the expense largely of travel and hospitality, because there was a big travel sector, or there is a big travel sector in Gloucestershire. And yeah, that hurts.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, one of the tragic things about this is where you've had some really successful businesses, and for no reason, no fault of their own, they're going to fail. I mean, if you have someone who's the managing director of their own company for the last 15, 20 years, suddenly their company is gone, they've got to go and find a job somewhere else. What advice do you give those guys?
I think in terms of CV writing, people are very prone to writing about themselves. So they want to write, it's as if they're standing in front of the pearly gates and they're kind of justifying their lives and all the things that they've done. The point about putting yourself on a market is figuring out what other people want, and then picking the things that you've done throughout your life and pulling them to the fore in your CV. So there's a lot of marketing in CV writing, and some people don't quite get it. So there are jobs, and we've done some great placements that are, people from different sectors, and more senior placements, assuming you're not going to hang out for a very high salary, but you have to be really tuned in to, as it were, what the question is. If they don't want somebody with 20 years of experience running their own business, you need to figure out what it is they do want and how you answer that question, rather than banging on about yourself, which isn't a very endearing trait, unfortunately.
Well, I'm really good at that, actually. I'm banging on about that all the time. That's great, Sue. Thanks very much. Sam, what else is in the papers? Anything else that's caught your eye?
Yeah, well, I think if you think this time last year, before coronavirus was even mentioned, what was the only news story in the world? It was Brexit, by a long, long way. And I think we've maybe gone from one extreme to another. We're potentially 2 or 3 months away from the EU transition coming into effect. And my fear is a lot of businesses might be sleepwalking into a big problem because they've not done the prep. So we as an organisation are going to be doing a thing about a Brexit preparedness event next month. But there's little stories now starting to appear in the paper about possible effects. And one caught my eye today in the Times. I'll show you the headline there, but you can see that the cost of an electric car could go up by £3,000 if we have a no-deal Brexit. And the actual details of it explained within the piece about why that would happen. But at a time where 2 things: one, we're trying to sort of get our economy going, but 2, we are trying to encourage more people to use electric cars and things. It just seems like another a thing that we need to think about. But it highlighted 2 things for me. One, that we've really got to get that debate going again about the about air pollution and so forth. But 2, Brexit, it does worry me. I was on a call recently with all the various stakeholders, and there was somebody there from the CBI, and she said that she's been inundated with queries from businesses about Brexit. And she said to me, "What about you at the FSB? I bet you're getting loads and loads of calls." And I have to say, look, small businesses just don't seem to be talking about it. But a lot of them are going to be affected with it, and that's whether we have a deal or we don't have a deal. So although a lot of people, glaze over now, even at the mention of Brexit, I think we do have to try and force it back on the agenda. And maybe, ironically, stories that aren't directly about Brexit, but about something else that relates to Brexit, like this electric cars one, might make people think about it.
But I think it goes back to, it's funny, yesterday was in the newspapers, and they were saying the price of the cars will go down at 2024. So, but we have a good, strong sector here with electric motors, actually. Some good businesses doing some great stuff. That brings us very nicely, Brian, if you can come back in, actually. Talking about Brexit, talking about accounts, talking about the different type of clients that you deal with. Are any of them talking to you about Brexit?
Yes, it has gone quiet, as Sam was alluding to. There was a lot of chatter and prep pre-lockdown about Brexit. Obviously, the cross-border movement of product being the biggest issue. And we did see quite a lot of clients with an international element where they were either setting up and preparing for getting around that barrier, whether that's setting up a subsidiary or a distribution centre somewhere offshore. Mainly Ireland, if I'm honest, they were looking towards Ireland for that sort of thing. But yes, when the pandemic hit, that kind of got forgotten. But it is coming back on the table. It has been slowly, people are starting to think about it again. Certainly since probably the end of August, where there was a light at the end of the tunnel, they are starting to not necessarily worry about that. They have bigger things to worry about, but it's certainly coming back on the table, and plans are starting to get rolled back out again, albeit well, quite a slow churn, I would say. But it will be ramping up over the next few months, I'm sure, as people start to expect it on the horizon.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Shall we go back over to Sam then? Sam, is there anything else in the national newspapers that caught your eye? We've got 10 minutes left. We're counting down.
Well, just I will say a couple of things about hobbies, because we all got to have things that we like. And I know you're a big golfer, Mark. I'm not. I've never really understood the appeal. And funnily enough, until yesterday, when we had a day off and we went up to Painswick Beacon, and to walk along those sites and see people playing golf, it looked the most attractive game in the world. But the reason I mentioned it was
you talk to Anthony about this, if you like.
In today's times, about one of the oldest courses in the country, the Royal North Devon Club at Northam Burrows, somewhere at Westwood Hoe, is having to move its 18th hole because it might slip into the sea otherwise. Now that's when you know climate change is happening, when you might have to move your golf holes. But the other bit of news I would say to someone, and because we need things to put a smile on our face, talking about hobbies, I'm a big Bruce Springsteen fan. And he releases a brand new album today, which should be on its way as we speak to me. 71 years of old, he's getting better. How many of us at 71 years of old can say that? So go and play golf at Painswick Beacon and have your headphones on and listen to Bruce Springsteen at the same time.
I played lots of times at Painswick Beacon, mate. Never again. I play a lot of time with Ant, actually. He's my golfing nemesis. I'm not going to let him say too much on this. You picked out some stories, hopefully from Punchline during the week. Is there anything that's caught your eye?
Two or three things caught my eye this week. We talked about businesses that are doing well. I like the one about the Cheltenham company that's helping CHB Medical, they're called, that are going to be getting very much quicker tests when you prick your finger to find out whether you got COVID or not. There was a story about sport, which I think we forget the damage that's happening there. Cheltenham Town say they could lose as much as £1 million during the financial year. Now, when you think of football, you think of the fact that some players earn that a week. You forget that at Cheltenham Town, at Forest Green Rovers, at Gloucester Rugby, they don't have that kind of numbers. And when you look at it, until they can start getting fans into those grounds again, they're in real trouble. And talking of other things, we're talking about arts as well. I know you've been doing a good series of articles about who's been getting that money from the government to help them. And I was particularly pleased this week to see support for Gloucester Guildhall and the Museum of Gloucester. Both have been given money to expand. I think Guildhall is a fantastic facility. I like going to concerts there. I like to go and see films there. It's a brilliant thing. And I think it's gone a bit under the radar, really, but there's been a lot of money for the arts, which is now starting to filter through. And that's definitely a positive. All reported in Punchline.
That's very, very kind of you, mate. The one story that caught my eye actually was the one that we've been working on, which was yesterday, which is about Gloucestershire Airport. I don't know if the rest of the guys have had a chance to read that. Basically, the new development there is upset quite a few of the big players on the techie side and the flying side, fixed wing and helicopters. Looks like they're going to have problems actually being able to fly around if they take out one of the runways there. So they're suggesting that they didn't get the information before it went out to planning, and there's a bit of a hoo-ha going there. My big worry is that we're talking about Hancock, SAS, some of these big players in the documents I've seen are actually thinking about leaving the airport, which should be devastating, because at the end of the day, an airport is like it says on the can, it's all about flying. So watch this space. I think it might be a story that will run and run. It depends, really. Guys, is there anything else anybody else would like to add to the debate this morning? Ryan, Sue, Ant, pop your hand up if there's anything else.
what do we think about the student community in Gloucestershire? How are we looking after them?
What do you think? Do you not think we're looking after them?
I think if there's another lockdown, it really, for young people, it's devastating. And, you know, from a recruitment point of view, people aren't taking youngsters on because they can't get them into the office. Hazelwoods will know that, you know, and the solicitors particularly. And it really hurts to see people who studied so hard and jumped through all the hoops, done everything required, and come out the other end with a massive debt and no real prospect of a job. And I wondered if other people felt that we could maybe do a bit more to help them along their way.
I think it's a very good point, actually. I mean, it's devastating for young people, and you know, I've got young daughters myself, and thankfully they're one's in full education, everyone's got a job over in London. But you are right. I think this whole generation, they won't be able to work in the hospitality sector. They won't be able to work in retail. I don't think they'll be able to rely on the bank of mum and dad, because mum and dad's jobs are under threat themselves. I think that it's going to be tough for some. What do you think, Ryan? Do you worry about the youth moving forward?
Absolutely. I've got 3 young children myself, so they are not of the age to be going to university or college or anything like that yet. But certainly there's a knock-on effect. You know, we are quite fortunate. We've got quite a healthy intake of trainees this year, which are straight out of uni. So they've started literally in the last couple of months. We have got our offices open, so we are able to give them some face-to-face training. But as for our other trainees who are also working and studying at the same time, a lot of their courses are being done virtually. It's a bit alien to me. But then I'm from the age that had a pen and paper to work with when I was doing my training. But I think the other side, which I think needs to be talked about a little bit, is the mental aspect of it. You know, certainly, as you can imagine, a lot of our trainees are in their early 20s. Some of them have moved into the county from other areas of the country, and quite often house sharing or living in a flat on their own. They certainly won't have a nice big house with a nice big garden that they can walk around in the day. You know, if they're working on a job throughout the day and then studying in the evening, they don't leave a chair, and that's got to have some mental impact on quite a lot of these young people who would normally be out and partying on a Friday and the weekend, if they still do that these days.
I mean, it might completely change the housing market moving forward. And
absolutely,
very, very quickly, wrapping this up, we've only got 2 minutes left or a minute left. Is it completely changed?
I guess in the short term, I think that obviously that's the case, and will be the case until, I don't know, nobody's got a crystal ball, but sort of March next year, whilst they work on a virus and work on better organising how to not do a lockdown and to operate society without it closing down in the same way that's happening in the north. I was speaking to a guy in South Africa who deals with our IT, and there everything's open, but you have to wear a mask all of the time. It's in the street, you cannot go out without a mask. And so they've gone down that approach, but their economy is kind of working and going forward. I think as far as the young people is concerned, then it's maybe a big refocus in the way that Sue described CVs being value orientated and focused upon what you can provide to your customer and to obviously the business and the employer. And I guess I'm over optimistic, I don't know, but I'm kind of think this time next year, it'll be, you know, I'm much more positive and upbeat than perhaps some others might be. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Anne. Thank you all, by the way. I think we're going to run out of time in around a minute, so I'm going to stop the recording. And thanks for joining Punchline Talks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, that's it. Don't go, guys. Thanks. I think I've stopped it. Oh no, I haven't stopped it.